I want to give you a hypothetical scenario. Suppose you're watching a baseball game, and this happens, where a batter hits a ball that lands in the field of play and then bounces over the wall. This is a ground rule double, where the batter is automatically awarded 2 bases and everyone on base advances 2 bases, and that's been the rule for close to a century at this point. If you're watching this video, you probably never seen a baseball game in your life where a ball bounced over the fence and was ruled a home run. Now I want you to imagine that after hitting a ground rule double, the player who hit it goes on a tirade in the post-game press conference. I want you to imagine that the player bashes the umpires and says, yes, the ball hit the ground, but then after bouncing, it went over the wall. That's a home run. That's a terrible call, and we got screwed over because of it. I absolutely hit a home run there. You'd look at that player as if he had 5 heads. What do you mean that's a home run? It literally did not go over the fence on the fly. There's an actual rule indicating what you must do to hit a home run, and very clearly, you did not do that. By your own admission, you did not do that. Referees, and in the case of baseball, umpires, get calls wrong a lot. But to publicly bash an official who got the call right because you didn't know the very obvious rules to the sport makes you look like a giant idiot. And I bring that up because this man right here is Buffalo Bills running back Robb Riddick. Riddick is somewhat of a Bills legend and cult hero for being incredible down by the goal line. In any situation down there, he knew how to leap over everyone and get into the end zone for 6. If you remember what Leonard Fournette was doing with the Jaguars in 2017, down by the goal line, and how instrumental he was to their success that season, Robb Riddick in 1988 was that on steroids. During the 1988 season, Riddick scored 12 rushing touchdowns, which was the 4th most in the NFL, only behind Greg Bell of the Los Angeles Rams, Ickey Woods of the Cincinnati Bengals, and Eric Dickerson of the Indianapolis Colts. All 12 of those rushing touchdowns were from either 1 yard out or 2 yards out. Riddick was a bit of a one-trick pony, but he was an awfully good one at that. And if not for an injury prior to the start of the 1989 season that ended his career, who knows how much longer he could have kept that going. And who knows how much things changed for the Bills in the late 80s and early 90s with a goal line threat that great. Like I said, Riddick scored 12 rushing touchdowns in 1988, many of which you're watching right now. But in his eyes, he should have had a 13th. And the reason why he didn't get a 13th touchdown and finish in sole possession of 4th place during that season, the reason why he didn't tie Cookie Gilchrist at his 1963 season for the 2nd most rushing touchdowns by any player in franchise history at that point, that was because the referee screwed up and denied him a touchdown that he deserved. Even though, as it turns out, not only were the referees 100% right, but Riddick looked like an idiot in the process. Because despite playing in the NFL for a long time, and despite playing football forever, he had no idea how the rules work. And it's a bizarre situation that nearly 4 decades later, we're going to break down today, because it's going to blow your mind as to how a player can be this confidently wrong and be this oblivious about the rules of his own position, especially for being a goal line specialist. Because this is the story behind Robb Riddick and the man who might just be, considering the circumstances, the dumbest running back in the over 60-year history of the Buffalo Bills franchise. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel, because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one that you may not have heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff and want to learn more, then this is definitely the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing, and for helping us grow this community. And with that in mind, let's talk about the time that Robb thought he was robbed. Before I talk about the actual incident in question and just how dumb it was, we need some context to understand how the game itself was going, as well as the supposed touchdown in question that had the man of the hour up in arms. It's December 4th, 1988. It's week 14 of the NFL season, and as we're winding down and heading into the home stretch, we've got an interconference battle on our hands between the Buffalo Bills and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. To say that this was a massive game for the Bills would be putting it lightly, as 13 weeks into the season, they look like the best team in football. Even though they were 11-2 and clinched the AFC East, winning the division for the first time since 1980, and for just the second time since the merger, their most recent game was a loss to the 10-3 Cincinnati Bengals by a final score of 35-21. What that meant was that even though the Bills control their own destiny, if they finished the season tied with the Bengals would own the tiebreaker and would get home field advantage throughout the playoffs and would host the AFC Championship between the teams if it came down to that. So if you wanted home field, you had to win this game. Now the good news was that your opponent was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as in, quite possibly, the worst team in football. They had a 3-10 record entering this game, which was the second worst record in the league. Their point differential of -102 was the second worst in the league. And their defense, which had allowed 325 points through 13 games, or 25 points per game, was the worst in the NFC and the second worst in the league. Combine that with Tampa Bay entering this game, having lost 7 of their last 8 games, and no one in their right mind was giving Tampa a chance at winning this one and pulling off, quite possibly, the biggest upset of the season. A 3-10 team with nothing to play for against an 11-2 team that was fighting for home field? Yeah, this was going to be a bloodbath. However, in a shocking twist of fate, the game turned out to be anything but that, as not only was Tampa giving Buffalo a scare, but as you can tell from these highlights, at the halftime break, the Bucs were turning heads when they led it 10-0. It was the first time since November 8th that the Bucs led by double digits. And when I say November 8th, I mean November 8th of 1987. That's how long it had been. It had been 13 months since the Bucs had a lead this large, and it was against the best team in football. Truly a stunner, as if the halftime break, following a field goal by John Carney and a 4-yard touchdown run by Vinny Testaverde, Buffalo was on the ropes. The Bills had just 4 first downs all half, and the Buccaneers held onto the ball for 20 of the first 30 minutes of the contest, outgaining the Bills 181-86 in total yardage, while holding the Bills, one of the best rushing attacks in football, to just 11 yards rushing in the first half. Safe to say, Buffalo had its work cut out for them. But the second half started way better than the first half for Buffalo, as they weren't going down without a fight. They weren't 11-2 for no reason. While the Bills didn't score on their first offensive drive, they did score right here on their first defensive drive, when Bruce Smith sacked Testaverde in the end zone for a safety to make it 10-2. It was still a 2-score game, since the 2-point conversion did not exist in 1988 at the NFL level. But still, at the very least, the Bills were finally on the board. And after starting with good field position off of the safety punt, the Bills were able to drive down the field and get down to the 1-yard line, where they were faced with 4th and goal. That's when head coach Marv Levy decided to be aggressive and go for it, which you can't blame any coach for doing in that spot at the 1-yard line, down by 8. And that was especially true when you had this man right here, Robb Riddick, on your team. Riddick scored 2 touchdowns from the 1-yard line the week before in that loss to Cincinnati, and was seemingly a cheat code, where he would time his jump perfectly, and there was nothing that you could do about it from an offensive standpoint. As long as Riddick had a chance to jump and had the space to do it, it was game over. So no hate on the decision whatsoever to go for it. Either you get it, and you cut it to a 1-point game with a play that's worked for you all season, or you don't get it because Tampa made a heck of an offensive play and the Bucs are starting the drive pinned at their own 1-yard line. And now, it's time to see what this man right here, Robb Riddick, has in his arsenal. And it's time to see whether the Bills can score their first offensive touchdown of the game. Here we go.
It's Riddick. I don't think he got there. Terrific goal line stand on the part of the Buccaneers.
Trying to go over the top, but he's met by Irvin Randall, number 54, and a host of other defenders. And he didn't make an inch.
Riddick has been the man this year over the top. He scored 10 rushing touchdowns, but not this time. The Bucs anticipated it perfectly, and you can see just how short the Bills ended up.
The Bucs had done it. The Bucs did what seemingly no team had done all season. They successfully stopped Robb Riddick down by the goal line on 4th down. Riddick decided that he wasn't going to jump on that one, saying, "I was gonna go over the top of the goal line," but saw a crack and decided to go after it. And as it turns out, that was a massive mistake, because he was nowhere close to breaking the plane. It was a turnover on downs. The Buccaneers got the ball back, and the Bucs pulled off the upset as a result, taking it by a final score of 10-5 in one of the biggest upsets of the entire 1988 season, and even the entire 1980s for that matter. Despite no one in their right mind giving a 3-win Bucs team a chance against the number 1 team in the NFL, the Bucs somehow did it, with that play being the big reason why. As head coach Marv Levy said on the decision to go for it there, we were down 10-2, and we knew we needed a touchdown and a field goal to win it. We were 2 feet away from the goal line, and they stopped us. And after the game, this man right here, Robb Riddick, was livid. Oh man, was he livid. Because in his eyes, he thought that he scored a touchdown, and that the referee made a terrible call. Now, keep in mind that back in 1988, there was instant replay. It was a really bad version of instant replay, and many people hated it for how inefficient it was and how long it took to get calls right, with instant replay being scrapped a few years later before being reinstated by the end of the 90s in the format we know of today. However, it existed. I bring that up because it was very clear that this was not a touchdown, that the ball did not cross the plane, and that the call could have been overturned if there was a mistake, which there very clearly was not. Everyone knew that this was not a touchdown and that the Bills got stuffed, except for Robb Riddick himself. And the reasoning for why? Well, let's just say it's gonna blow your mind. Because as Riddick said on how poor the officiating was and how the referees blew that call, my head was in the end zone. I thought it was a terrible call. He then added that, as far as I'm concerned, I wasn't stopped, saying that although the ball never broke the plane, his head did. And because his head broke the plane, it should have been a touchdown. Which, I'm sorry, what? You're criticizing the referees for not giving you a touchdown when, by your own admission, you didn't score a touchdown? That's like saying in golf that you hated that the PGA officials awarded you a penalty stroke for hitting the ball into the water, even though, by your own admission, you hit the ball into the water. It's not about where your head is when you score a touchdown. It's never been that way. That is quite literally never been the rule. If it was your head, can you imagine how insane that would be to arbitrate? People with dreadlocks would have a huge advantage because the moment any part of their hair hits the goal line, regardless of where the ball is, they would score. Every helmet looks the same, so you have to figure out which helmet was the one that crossed the plane and whether that was the one with the ball. If you have the ball, you lose the ball, but then cross the goal line to try and recover the ball, Is that a touchdown? Of course not. If two people have the ball at the same time, which helmet is the one that counts as a touchdown? You get why this is not the rule, right? It makes no sense. Look, there are some rules that I completely understand a player not knowing. If there's a bizarre situation that comes up, I don't expect the player to necessarily know the entire rulebook. Like, if you're a backup defensive tackle and you're watching that 2024 game on Thursday Night Football between the Denver Broncos and the Los Angeles Chargers and see the fair catch kick, as in a play that had not been successfully executed in close to half a century, and you had no idea what the rule was, seeing as you're not a special teams player, and that play was so bizarre and unprecedented, I'm not going to necessarily hold that against you. But a goal line running back, not knowing that you need to actually get the ball across the goal line for it to count as a touchdown? A running back who had been in the NFL since 1981 and had been playing football for basically his whole life, not knowing that in order to score a touchdown, you needed to get the ball into the end zone? How do you not only not know that, but then put the officials on blast for screwing up the call and screwing up the game when they, by your own admission, made the right call? Yeah, the ball didn't cross the goal line, but it should still be a touchdown because my head did. Newsflash, just because your head crosses the goal line means nothing. Absolutely nothing. The ball needs to cross. And if you don't know that, when it is literally your job to know that, then that is entirely on you. So the moral of the story is simple. If you're a running back, you should know the rules of how to score a touchdown. And putting the officials on blast for not awarding you a touchdown when you yourself didn't even know the rules of a touchdown is not very smart. I'll put it that way. Maybe if Riddick knew that he needed to cross the goal line with the ball and not his head, he would have jumped there. Maybe he would have scored, and maybe the Bills would win that game, clinch home field advantage throughout the playoffs, and potentially make it to the Super Bowl. There are a lot of hypotheticals you can play with. Unfortunately for Bills fans, those are just hypotheticals. All because Robb Riddick didn't know the rules. Because on this December day in 1988, contrary to what he might have thought, Robb did not get robbed. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name at the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.